changes to the agenda. So I'll do a quick update and then maybe we can just vote on some amendments to the agenda real quick. I just want to remind everybody that it's 4th of July weekend in Madison, which we know there's a lot going on in town. The concert on the Green is on Saturday in the evening. The fireworks are Sunday night, and the Independence Parade kicks off at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning on July 4th itself. Just want to remind any residents watching this now or later that you cannot purchase any beach passes in person starting noon on Friday. They are going to be sold Friday morning at the Chamber of Commerce building, which is downtown near the town green. And then throughout the holiday weekend through July 4th, if you don't have a beach pass, you can only buy one online. You cannot buy any in-person beach passes. That's because that's a huge resource to staff the sale of those things. This is the 3rd year we've done the special event policy. It's worked really well. You just have to plan it in advance. So if you're planning to bring friends or family to the beach and they need stickers or tags or whatever, buy them by this Friday morning. So that's my recommendation to you. So with that, before we jump, well, let's do selectmen comments and then I can do, I'll do the agenda item changes. Any selectmen comments or no? Okay, great. All right, any hands raised, citizens comments?
No hands are raised.
And nobody in the room. Great. All right. With that, I would like to make a motion to open the agenda, to amend the consent agenda, and then to also add 2 items to the regular business item and move some things around. So I'd like to make the motion to open the agenda. So, okay. Now discussion. I just want to add some appointments that we had intended to put in Friday, they just didn't make it to the final. And then we wanted to move some things around. We have Craig Patla here from Connecticut Water, which we had been back and forth. He's been pushed off several meetings now. And then we heard today that he could attend tonight. So I did want to include him on the agenda. So I want to add him to the agenda. And then also our volunteer fire here, we wanted to move up their discussion item earlier in the agenda. So they didn't have to sit around in this very warm room. So all in favor of amending or to open up the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now I'd like to make a motion to open the agenda to amend the consent agenda with the following appointments. Number 2, Virginia Rapp, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, alternate term expiring January 1st, 2025. 3, Alex Province, Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, regular term expiring January 1st, 2024. And to amend the following within the regular business part of the agenda. Number 8, adding number 8, presentation from CT Water on water conservation and potential drought conditions, and to move agenda items number 13 and number 14 to item number 9 and number 10.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So with that, now I'd like to make a motion to approve the amended consent agenda. So,
Second.
okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Thank you. Okay, real quick, item number 7 is just an update on the Madison Downtown Utility Project. I'd like to invite, is Rob going to be on this call?
I think so.
Okay, Rob, so.
He's on.
Okay, great. If you want to move them up. So in your packet is a detailed list of all the different things that have been going on with this project. This is obviously something the town has been trying to complete for 20 years, I think. And probably the biggest hurdle was getting the easement signed last year, the final easements. There was 3 easements, I think, that we were still outstanding. We got one of them signed, I think, the fall of 2021, and then the final group of easements signed in the summer of 2022. And so I'm just going to share with my screen real quickly, just to talk about where we are in the project now, just because a lot of people have been asking, why isn't it done? I thought you said it was going to get done. So once the easements were signed. So, so I just did a real quick update, and then Rob, who prepared like the detailed memo, he can answer your questions about specifics. But pretty much since last summer, once we've gotten the south side easement signed, we started planning out the project, and we actually hired an electrical contractor to start doing electrical infrastructure work. They were hired with the hope that if we did not get the north side signed and completed, we'd still do the south side. Well, fortunately, literally a month after we started forward on the south side work, the people on the north side were able to sign the agreements. And so, everything got finalized. And so this means that 15 properties, 17 buildings basically have to change their entire electrical infrastructure to accept service underground versus above. And that involves a lot of different logistics and a lot of planning because every property is different. You have older buildings, their services set up differently, and a lot of just different types of infrastructure challenges. ANS has been started working very diligently on moving towards getting all that infrastructure work done. They got the baseline infrastructure done with like transformer pads and putting up major equipment. Now we needed to then move forward with doing the individual work on the different properties. And so we extended the contract with ANS in January, and they started to go and work at each of the buildings to get the work done. Luckily, on the south side, they've been able to get all the meter work completed. And this is all dealing with a lot of supply chain delays and issues. So some of this dragged out a little bit getting some of the equipment. But fortunately, Henny Penny, I think just in the last couple of weeks, actually is now getting service underground.
Yay.
And the plan is to get all the other properties on the south side done by the end of August. So they're going to do 1 to 2 per week. And then Eversource would be able to come in and remove the poles in early September. The north side, the complication there is that they've done all the infrastructure work, but some of the buildings there need this one type of thing, which is called a dual gain meter socket. And I can let Rob talk more about that are in very short supply, and there's a huge backlog. And they're saying it could take 12 months.
Oh.
So we are working with Eversource. What they were gracious enough to do on the south side was change what they have a standard of using these dual gain sockets. We only have one property that needs this on the south side. So they allowed us to do something different there. We are going to be heavily working with them and promoting the idea of having the same allowance for the north side. So we're going to be having conversations with them. And if that were the case, that would mean we could finish this, in the fall and have all the poles taken down at once. If they don't change their standard and allow for this, then we're subject to the whims of the supply chain. So Rob, I don't know if you want to kind of weigh in a little bit more, but I know he's done an amazing job actually shepherding this over this last year, and that you can see all the different meetings. So I know a lot of people, the public thinks that nothing's happening, but it's actually a lot of work has been happening, a lot of planning and conversations, and then also work, boots on the ground has been happening, but it's just been small pieces in each property. So Rob, I don't know if you want to weigh in for a second.
Sure. Basically your slide covers really everything that's happened since July of 22. There's been a lot of infrastructure that's been added. Like Peggy said, that's it's impacting 15 properties and 17 buildings, and like our contractor and Eversource has noted throughout our many field meetings, there's no two buildings alike. Like every single building, some of their existing meters are years old. Some of them are a little bit more current, but none of them are the same. So that there's some challenges with that. Additionally, I guess instead of rattling on here, let's get back down to the bottom bullet point, the north side meter work. There are a number of properties on the north side that that require 2-gang and 3-gang meters, and our electrical contractors sort of scouring the earth to find as many of these as possible. They have them ordered, and we have other outlets where we're trying to find these. And if we do find them, then they're going to immediately install them. They're not going to sit around and wait. But unfortunately, as of right now, Eversource is not willing to move from their sort of standard meter installations. They made that one exception on the south side to continue shepherd this project along. And that's allowing us to complete the north side in a nice expedited process this summer. It's unknown whether or not they'll make exceptions for 5 or 6 buildings on the north side. We're gonna continue to push that. But really, like Peggy had mentioned, we are at sort of the mercy of the supply chain and when these materials come in. But, since we brought A&S and back on in January and continued their work, I mean, we were moving at, with the minor infrastructure work at a few locations. One thing I'd like to note that's not on the slide, and I think this is definitely something that the people would like to hear, is as of today, 95%, there's only one building that has not been cut over for telecommunication service. I know we like to make a lot of the electrical work because that's what was tied to like the easements. But I think a big milestone right now is 95% of the properties, with the exception of one, has all Comcast has done, and Frontier, they've done a great job of getting out there and literally within a month and a half have cut over every single building downtown with really minor outages. It's really within under an hour. A lot of them have been 15 minutes, but under an hour for most of these. So I'd like to commend Comcast for being very responsive and getting this work completed. So right now we're almost looking at just electrical, like telecommunications basically complete. If you look up at the poles, there's a lot of wires that are now no longer there. Not just on the poles, but even to the buildings themselves. So that's just something I think that was definitely noteworthy.
Any questions from the board? I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating for us. We would have liked to have seen this gone more quickly, but dealing with that as well as, just trying to get what we need equipment wise, but excited at least to maybe get half the street done, by the early September, I guess. And there's no reason that wouldn't get done, right? Because we have the equipment to complete the rest of the south side, right? Rob,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So just like and I know the public doesn't have the opportunity, at least right now, to see this, but in the Board of Selectmen packet that was provided, we currently have dates for the remaining south side services to actually be cut over. It's no longer sort of a hypothetical July 16th, the week of July 16th, 23rd, 30th, week of August 6th, week of August 13th. We're going to be doing these, one every week or 2 weeks, and Eversource has this on the schedule. Our electrical contractors on board. The meters are already up. So yeah, these are all planned. It's no more, hey, theoretically this can happen. I mean, the north side will all be cut over by August, and then with the hope of September, Eversource will get out there and remove the poles. It's really right now the north side being the challenge.
Any other questions? So to be continued, but if you get questions from public, obviously, there's hope. I guess is what I'm saying. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. I know this has been, Rob has done a great job just staying on top of all this. And appreciate all the work and persistence that you've shown.
Thank you.
We continue to beat the drum too with Eversource to try to see if we can get them to change their standards for the remaining. So we get it done this fall. So, okay, with that, then thanks a lot, Rob.
Nice work, Rob.
Thank you.
We have Craig Patla from the Connecticut Water Company to talk about water conservation and potential drought conditions. So I'd like to invite Craig, if you could please come up, and we do have a microphone if this helps. And I just want to give a little background of why we're having this presentation. So Craig and I have been working a bit with, there's been some neighborhoods in the town that have had issues with water. And, where they've had issues with the wells running dry. Connecticut Water has done a great job stepping up and assisting those communities that have had issues. But it kind of opened up a broader dialogue about development and water as a resource in our community and what are we going to be seeing in the future. And I think last summer we went through a lot of drought, and all we could do is beg people to not water their lawns, and yet everybody watered their lawns. So I think to talk a little bit more about conservation, how important it is, and then what are some of the tools that the town might be able to tap into at one point if we want to do that, that could manage water conservation better. So I will.
Want me to use that?
Let's try the mic, because sometimes the recording, Jacqueline, if you could let us know, you can hear Craig remotely.
I've never shied away from a mic.
That sounds good.
My name is Craig Pavla. I'm president of Connecticut Water Company, and Peggy's right. We started this conversation as it related to Lyle Drive specifically, up near and adjacent to the Brown School Complex and Legend Hill, where we did have a groundwater issue last year in the midst of our third drought in 5 years. And I never miss an opportunity to talk about conservation, especially if I have the ear of a town CEO like Peggy. She's all ears on this. But I'll just give you a little bit of history on who we are. Connecticut Water Company, we operate the main system across the southern part of town here. We are along the beaches and as far north as Green Hill Road. We also operate two what we call satellite systems in town. One is the system I just mentioned that we worked with the town some 15 years ago or so to treat the uranium that was in the school's wells. And then Green Springs is another system that we own and operate a little further down Route 79 towards town. But the main system itself is supplied by a combination of surface water, reservoir, and groundwater wells. Our surface water supply is along Route 80 in Killingworth. It is not the reservoir in Madison, which is a bit confusing, but that is where Connecticut Water Company's main source of supply for what we call our shoreline region exists. In combination with that, we have groundwater wells along the Hammonasset River Basin. One at the Reddick property, one at Five Fields, and one at the Weiss property, which is where the campground is in Killingworth. Over time, Reddick Well was one of our large producers in the shoreline area. Due to climate change, brackish water has made its way up the Hammonasset River Basin to the point where we can't use that water any longer. There's too many chlorides in that water, so we've lost about 300 to 400 gallons a minute supply into the system here. We subsequently raised our dam at the Killingworth reservoir property, but as of the year before last, we now have what we call stream flow requirements that deep requires us to release a certain volume of water on a permanent basis, depending on the time of year that there is. This is a requirement that's new. It's to focus on the balance of the use of the state's waters between domestic consumption use and the ecology. And what it's done is it's put a very large strain on our surface water supply in Killingworth. Now, you take that shortage in combination with the Reddick well loss, and we are deficit from what we were in the early 2000s for available supply in the town here. Now, to exacerbate the problem, we've had an unprecedented amount of droughts, state declared droughts, and we see it. We know before the state does because the use just really spikes. We peak, and a peaking factor is basically the number of times normal usage, water use increases to in the summertime. We peak at a factor of over 2 here in the town of Madison, which is one of the largest peaking factor towns that we have. We serve 62 towns across the state of Connecticut. Due to nobody's surprise, I'm sure, to irrigation. And the conversation that we started a year ago was, how can we, as a community, help to preserve the water that we have and the times that we need it? Because once it's gone, it's gone. And we have to wait for it to recharge, which here in the Northeast, it will happen. But we've come too dangerously close for my liking and I'm sure for most people's liking, of us running out of water. We actually got down to a 95-day supply in the Killingworth Reservoir last year. Anything below 200 is red line. So we wanted to start the conversation about helping to curb that usage, to preserve that water. Everything from posting information on the town's website to the scrolling signs on the that we're currently using for the 4th of July announcements. I actually last year, you may have noticed, I resorted to shaming people with conserve water signs that we put strategically close to those who water, and just asking people to be mindful about their water use. Not saying to curb, not saying to completely cease it, but there are better ways and more conservation-minded ways to irrigate your lawns, to use water wisely. And I think if we could partner with the town in those communications, that would certainly be a step in the right direction. And as well, we had also talked about the potential for even adopting ordinance that could give a little more teeth to the idea of calling for mandatory conservation when certain drought triggers are hit. So I'd love to start with a logical step, which is helping us in communication, and then see where that takes us, recognizing we are your resource. We are your water resource. We value the partnership that we have with the town. For those who don't know, I'm a resident here too. And the line forms at my door pretty early from the operations folks, from the Madison people start watering their lawn, because I'm obviously associated with that. But really, it's just I'm here to reemphasize with Peggy and the rest of the board on our partnership there. We value it, we count on it, and in this particular case, we kind of need it. So no time like when it's been cool and wet
Yeah.
to talk about drought, because when you're in it, sometimes it's hard to see your way out of it. So it is the time to have the discussion now, and I thank you for your time, and I apologize for not having a presentation, but I've never been in a presentation where somebody said, I wish he would talk more.
Greg, I just got a rain over.
I did too. And that's a good thing. But one thing we've learned with the loss of Reddick and with the stream flow requirements now imposed on us, the reservoir droughts are dramatic. So it takes about a 2-week period before we enter into a state monitor qualified drought. So it's time to talk about it now. We're lucky. Last year at this time, we were already in stage 3. So, and like I said, 3 out of the last 5 years, saltwater intrusion up in Ammonasset, there's something afoot here.
How many towns did you say are, whatever, watered by those 3 distribution
So it's
sites?
basically from Guilford to Old St.
Okay.
And you can kind of follow the 95 corridor. For that, we extend a little north in some of the towns, but mostly it's in the southern areas of those towns.
Do you have plans to put more sources online?
Well, establishing new sources of supply is very difficult. What we have now is we have an agreement with the regional water authority to purchase water from them to kind of level out the peaks. We are exploring treatment for that Reddick property now. All of that is very expensive. That's saltwater removal. It's almost like desalinization, high energy use, high technology. We are going to put something in place that speaks to our desperation. I'd love to be able to pop another hole, but it's not easy to cite new sources of water in the state of Connecticut. The waters in Connecticut, all waters are Connecticut, are owned by the state. You have to get permitted for withdrawals of them, which we have permits for all of our withdrawals, whether it's surface water or groundwater. And it's very difficult, especially as you're trying to strike that balance between all the various uses of water. And the thing that started our conversation was around groundwater issues. People think, out of sight, out of mind, but groundwater, as we've seen, has been impacted by these droughts too. And interestingly, oftentimes you won't see the impacts of a drought on groundwater for potentially 18 months to 2 years later. So there may still be things coming our way from a groundwater impact standpoint. So always being mindful of our use. And that, I have my own well at my house, and being mindful of that use, so that my wife isn't, can't do load after load after load of laundry. Living on a well is different. We have a lot of people that just move into town here that aren't aware of that and come from a connected system where the use just results in a high water bill. Well, here the impacts could be grave to your park, to your neighbors, to your neighborhood, and that's the lesson we learned up in Long Drive last year.
In those communities in New England that implemented some kind of conservation efforts, either ordinance or voluntary programs, what percentage of savings have those communities been able to recognize?
It's not what you would think. I don't have the numbers, but I know Aquarium had to institute that because they are in a worse situation than us down in the Fairfield County area. The irrigation load down there exceeds factor, I think it's 2.5, but in Greenwich, they have passed an ordinance. Now, unfortunately, it's not adhered to as one would hope, but we are regularly out there with messaging to our customers to please voluntarily conserve water, giving them tips on how to do so, and we don't see much of a reduction.
I'm curious though, so if we went down that path of an ordinance, who would enforce it? Is it the police? Is it, Sam's organization? Like,
I nominate
who
host company
typically
number one.
enforces it? It's not you guys, right?
I nominate host
We don't
company
have
number one.
to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the challenge, right?
Right. So coming at it from the other side, have you thought about taking a page out of the electric utilities playbook and offering carrots up? Talk about irrigation, right? So I shake my head every time I drive in a rainstorm, drive by a lawn with all of its sprinklers on.
Yeah.
There are controllers now for sprinkler systems that are connected and they use predictive. They read the weather and they go, it's going to rain. We're not going to water.
Exactly.
Or just as straightforward as having a rain sensor or a working rain sensor. Eversource offers highly subsidized pieces of equipment, smart thermostats, getting rid of energy inefficient equipment. Have you thought about going down the carrot route and not so much the stick?
Yeah, the subsidizations available to Eversource aren't available to us. It's something that we can ask for in the process of our next rate case, which we will. What we were able to get through our last rate proceeding, which was 2.5 years ago, was what we call inclining block rate structure, so that once you get over what would be normally used, you pay more for water. So once you get over what your base load is, what you're using in the middle of January, the presumption being the balance is being used for irrigation or outdoor usage, you pay more for that water. Now, it's a conservation method. Still the stick, to your point, Bruce, but we can certainly explore that. We're not typically granted the same kind of allowance to do that with PURA, who was our regulator there. I would much rather try the communication, full frontal communication, and really have opportunities like this to talk to communities and let them know how important it is, so that the word's out there and people can understand it. I think for the most part, people don't understand it. I've been in the water business for 33 years. My mother still thinks the water comes from underneath her sink. So she has no idea. Now, how many of those kind of people are out there that just think it's an endless supply? So being able to communicate that is gold to us. And
Well, I think also we saw last year during the drought, we drive through certain neighborhoods, we're in a drought and we had pristine lawns. People were irrigating either unknowingly because they set their systems up and they just
Yeah.
go and then they go away for a month, you know?
Yeah.
No one's monitoring or manage it, or they don't care because they feel that they've invested a lot in their landscaping and they don't want to lose, what they put into it. So it's a challenge. I mean, the town has struggled with it. We use well water for most of our sports fields are irrigated that way. We have millions of dollars into the sports fields, so we do water during times of conservation, and we've had complaints from people, but you're making that trade-off about millions of dollars to rebuild and redo fields, as we move to more artificial turf fields, which we are going to be doing some more of that over the next couple of years, that might help a little bit. But so I get the homeowners' concerns, but I think there has to be some sort of balance that, I think more just personal responsibility, right?
And I think for a large part that comes with education on it. So that's more what I'm talking about, is helping us to educate the community about the effects of it. The stresses, strains on our system here, and just being really forward with it. I think every little bit helps. And some good old fashioned peer pressure along the way too.
I think what might be helpful too is we're doing our plan of conservation and development. I think there needs to be some good hard data in that about our usage and the drought conditions we've had the last couple of years, so people see that as part of it.
I also think with our affordable housing group as well, because if we're talking about how much water we're using now with our current population density being what it is, and the state has a push for increased population density within our shoreline towns, it's gonna go up. And then what can we actually support with the water that we have available to us currently? That's a very important piece of the conversation.
And as it sits right now, the available supply is going to be determined off of our max month average day. It's a statistic that's used. And we're creeping close to not allowing future connections
So,
with our
that's
existing
gonna be very
supply.
important too.
We're not there.
Yeah.
We're not there, but we're getting there. And
That's important for people to know.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And we're lucky that we have this connected system with available supply. Most of the towns in the state, most of the towns that we serve are small systems. Hebron, Marlboro, East Hampton right now, they would love to have economic development and ability to even decide about housing like that in their town. There's no water. They can't grow at all. And people wonder why. What's the water? You don't have water, you can't grow.
See, how do you do that because right now, there's no restrictions on digging a well, right? So if you just have to demonstrate, if you want to put a development in, you have to demonstrate that you have a well that can suit that at the time of approval, right? But you don't have to show any demonstration that you can support that over a longer period of time. That I understand it, right?
A homeowner would not.
Yeah,
We would. Because we would be putting in a community system.
right, if you were, I'm just saying though, if you're looking at, when do you step in and have to run a system? A community system, like how many number of housing units?
It has more to do with, it's called a certificate of convenience and necessity. So a developer can come in with the idea that they're gonna put a community well in there. And if it's within our exclusive service area, we would take that system over and run it, but we would have to demonstrate that there was no impairment to the surrounding properties due to the well there, which is what we're
Right,
experiencing.
right. Right.
Greg, closely related, what insight do you have for those homeowners that are currently on their own wells, and what's going on with the underground aquifers? Is the drought beginning to impact homeowners' wells? That's what I'm trying to get at.
It is, and it's impacting our wells. We're seeing reduction in yields. We're seeing reduction in static levels and dynamic levels in our wells. We've got over 400 wells all over the state of Connecticut, and we're seeing the impact of it. But like I said, especially in the bedrock wells, you may not see the effects of that for some time. It's not, and rarely is immediate. You may see it months or years down the road.
Well, I think,
That's a wake-up call.
yeah, in the interest of time, I think it was important to start having this conversation. I think,
I really look at tonight as
Yeah.
just an initial conversation that we can continue.
and also focusing on, as, you know, we work through the summer conservation messaging, we should maybe start pushing that a little bit more. Hopefully, we won't be like we were last summer, which was a pretty serious drought.
It was, and if it's not this summer,
It'll be next summer.
yeah, the odds are just against us here of late. It's become fairly regular.
Yeah.
Craig, do you guys have a brochure or pamphlet of any sort with conservation tips that we could maybe share on our website or through our e-blasts?
Yeah, that's what we talked about
Okay.
last time is putting some material and a flag on the website to help us get the message out there.
But I'd love it to, I think, where you were going too, is make sure we're also talking about, you know, I'm a well owner as well, so I mean, I want to make sure everybody understands
Right.
the problem and is
Yep.
contributing
Yes.
to the bigger picture issue, not just folks below Green Hill.
And that's smart, Scott. I mean, it's an all-in scenario. It-
You're not far from Wild
This is true, this is true.
You've been asked.
Peggy, one final thought from me.
Yes.
You mentioned the plan of conservation and development.
Yeah.
But the more Craig educates us, the more I'm thinking this has to be part of our strategic plan.
Yeah,
No, absolutely.
totally agree.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not just a land use discussion.
Yeah.
It's, it impacts the overall quality of life here in many different ways, because it impacts our own resources as a town.
But it's a cultural mind shift. We need to adopt sort of a thinking over a period of time. It's
As we
not
did with
just,
energy.
it's not just, oh, drought, let's change, let's turn the
Yeah.
sprinkler system off. It needs to be a sort of a cultural shift, I think.
So we've been spoiled in the Northeast, and we're considered water rich here in the Northeast. We have joined with San Jose Water in California. We're now a sister company of theirs. And when I go out there, the mindset of the communities out there is just completely different, as you might imagine, because they are in a perpetual drought that is very impactful, notwithstanding the rain they had this year, which turned into catastrophe for them. But their use of water and water habits are very different out there. A lot of it is thick, but some of it is caring as well. And what the state of California has done because of the conditions out there as well. We're in Texas, as you might imagine, the usage out there is, and the available supply is what drives a lot of the behaviors that you see. There's just no water. So.
Okay, well, I thank you for coming. I'm glad we finally got this on for the first step. And then I think maybe we'll coordinate some of the public awareness information over the next couple of months.
I would willingly participate, and Connecticut Water is at your service for anything. We're with Bobby and Sandy and the team here all the time as well. We like to think of ourselves as your water department, you know, so call us.
Right.
Strategic conversation, absolutely. You're not going to get very far on a strategy if there's no water.
Well, your input too, as we go through as a town resident, as we go through this planning process. So stay engaged. So,
Count on it.
all right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And you have to leave the mic here.
Yeah. Great.
See you guys.
All right, thanks a lot.
I'll get somebody.
So with that, you know, not to be down, but something that's important, we just need to be more, thinking about a lot more today. Item number 9, discuss and take action to approve a bid waiver request from Madison Hose Company. Number 8, to expend funds to purchase a C-grade model TB50 CA Marauder pumper, water pumper, right? To award a contract in fiscal year 23-24 to C-grade fire apparatus. Member of the HGAC cooperative in the amount of $1,030,293. Authorizing the first selectman to sign all necessary contracts and documents. Funding in fiscal year 23-24 CIP.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and this is basically a conversation that we started in earlier this year through the CIP process, right, Bobby, about the Chief Kittle, the new truck, right?
It's been over a year.
Yeah.
It's been over a year.
And you, board members received a memo from the
Yes.
department about this, so we're unfortunately went up again. So in this 4 or 5 months, I think that we had made changes in CIP to account for this. We're pulling it forward so we can order it because these things are in huge backlog and in high demand, and we want to make sure that we get this slated into our timeline. So, any questions for Chief Kettle or?
It's just no water to pump.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it was kind of a downer.
How are you
topic.
doing with
I know. Well, I had it at the end, but I was asked to move it up, so, I guess so, all in favor, say aye for item number 9.
Aye.
Okay, and then item number 10 is to discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation for the Madison Hose Company water apparatus truck replacement in the amount of $135,000 pending board of finance approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and this is just the additional funding since the price went up again, since we did the initial estimate.
Unfortunately.
in CIP. So, common theme, unfortunately, but at least this will secure it now, right? It can't change again on us once we do this and sign the document.
July 1.
Okay.
So you're locked in.
Yeah.
Good.
So any other questions?
The old equipment is gonna go to auction or?
The current truck itself, we have not planned anything yet because it's still 2 to 2.5 years out before the new one would be here. So I would be giving you this information of what it would be at this time.
Fair enough.
But it
Wow.
typically they do resell, they do, yeah, that's the problem here.
The main reason to order it now, we did our homework, our due diligence, but the price increase is about 2% a month. And there's also a new emission standard that is coming out in 2027. And they're telling us it's gonna take over 2 years to complete the truck. So we're trying to beat both timelines to be fiscally responsible to the town.
All right, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, guys, I'm sorry
Thank you
about
very
that.
much. Thank you.
Hopefully you enjoyed the water presentation. Very, all right. Okay, so next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve a resolution to transfer funds between projects within the $89,200,000 appropriation and bond authorization for costs related to the construction of a new pre-kindergarten grade 5 school on Lumbertown Road, renovations and improvements for the conversion of Brown Intermediate School into a kindergarten grade 5 school, and improvements and upgrades to Polson Middle School.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, so this is following on our conversation, and I would like to invite, Graham's there. Welcome, Graham. I'm gonna turn off, does anybody in the room need the transcript? I don't, it kind of came up. No? So turn it off so we can see. Graham, who is the chair of our new school building committee. And I think Stacy is also, if she's on, we could have her included, but this is basically following on our conversation about the plan to kind of fill the gap. And so I'm going to pull up my presentation from last meeting. Just to summarize, we talked through this at our last meeting. And this is basically highlighting the project, also highlighting the great news that we're going to be getting an additional $6 million from the state to reduce our bonding needs on the new school construction project. Summarizing that we have a potential shortfall of anywhere from 5.9 to $7.6 million due to the design development plan that has been put together, and a lot of that is cost inflation that has hit us. And after conversations, we know that we added additional classrooms as well, so that added roughly $2.4 million into the budget for this. And so we are recommending, and the board passed last time, that we fund $2.4 million from our undesignated fund balance. And now we need to add an additional $3.5 million that we're recommending transferring over from the Polson project. The Polson project, just to remind the public, after more detailed analysis, we just had rough estimates when we did this a few years ago, is actually coming out much lower below budget than we had originally anticipated. So we have a surplus in that amount of $5 million. So if we transfer new funds to the new school, why does this keep coming up? Oh, I have to hit that. Okay, sorry. So if we transfer money from Polson into the new school project, it still leaves us a surplus there and allows us to do both the auditorium upgrades as well as to modernize the HVAC system. So that's just a quick summary. And so I don't know, would you like me to keep these slides up, or I think Bruce, you had some questions for Graham. Do you want me to keep these slides up, or?
It's fine with me, as long as we can still
Okay.
talk to Greg.
Yeah, that's, well, I guess I have this, I'll put them back up if you want. Okay, go ahead. So the idea here is let's transfer the 3.4 million. That gives them the budget funding that they need secured so that they can actually go forward with the project. So with that, I guess, I know some board members had questions. Bruce, you want to-
Sure, I'll go
yeah?
first. Graham, can you talk a little bit about the contingency funds for the project and what they can be used for?
So there's three pots of money.
Yeah.
One, and I don't know, actually, Peggy, do you have a slide, I think, that kind of laid it out. I don't know if you can. Yeah, I think the last one.
Yeah.
Yes. So the contingency is made up of three pots of money, only one of which is quote unquote our money, so to speak, the town's money. The first one is a design and pricing contingency and this is a process that Colliers uses with the construction manager. And since we're only at DD, which is 35% plans, they assume there's going to be some items that aren't necessarily shown on the drawings that are going to be needed for a complete project. So that $2.2 million, as we finish the plans, that goes to zero because there's things going to show up. So that money is that'll go to zero at CDs and the number will be gone. The CM contingency, which is $1.1 million, that's a contractual element with the construction manager, and that's quote unquote his contingency to use for things as he's bidding out these individual trades. There may be some items in between there that don't get captured, and that's just by contract, that's quote unquote his money. The final contingency, the $5.2 million, that is our money. And at DD, Colliers fears this is an appropriate amount of money to have. We don't have to spend that money, but we don't know what we don't know at this point, and we generally won't know, completely all the risks until we get, out of the ground, so to speak, or a lot closer to being out of the ground. So they recommend, and I would concur, that we shouldn't quote unquote spend that contingency after the bids open and after we're assured there's no problems, some site unknowns. We can, look to return some of that to the money. I think there was a concern that we might, if we had some money left over, we would spend it on the alternates. I think we can make a commitment as a building committee to come back to the Board of Selectmen and discuss what we spend that on. We have to go back to the Board of Ed, but I'll commit to going back to the Board of Selectmen and discuss that before we do anything with that extra money, if we have it. God hopes we do have the money, and we get a good buy. But again, we don't know that. And we're meeting with the state on the 29th, and we kind of have to show them that we have a package with normal contingencies and normal ranges to reassure them that before they release us to go to bid. So that's kind of a high level overview of the three pots of money.
I mean, I think the idea here is that we transfer the money, now they have what they need to demonstrate that they can go out and bid the project, that they have funding secured. But we all recognize that some of that funding is coming from another project, right? Even though we have surplus there and we could afford to do this, I think we all want to be a part of the conversation when you get the actual bids in. Let's see, maybe bids come in lower than you expected. So rather than having, the building committee make all the decisions about how that money is going to be allocated, have a conversation with the board of selectmen. Because we can transfer money back if we need to.
Could I ask too, because I don't know, maybe I missed it, but I don't feel like it's been clear. Where is the surplus coming from in the Polson project? What came in so much under budget that we have such a surplus?
You had a memo in your last packet that talked about the actual cost of the project, and it was from BL Associates, who were the advisors on the HVAC project at Polson. Let's just keep hopping around. So they've come up with a revised estimate. They just, when this was all done 3-4 years ago, it was amorphous. They didn't know a lot about what would be needed. There was not a detailed deep dive on this. They came up with an overall budget. BL has gone in and done an extensive budget. You got a 2-page memo in the last packet that explained this is what you would do to modernize the HV, and this is what the cost would be for a conventional system. We also asked them to look at geothermal, because we've been trying to do that in a lot of our buildings. If you include geothermal, that's when you are getting a much higher price for that HVAC system. So this shows you here, the updated modernization estimate is $13 million. The updated auditorium estimate is $2.8 million. And so that gets you to a surplus, because we had budgeted $21.5 million when we went out to referendum in 2022. So there's $5 million there. And so if we transfer money to the new school project, we still are going to have technically $1.5 million there to handle stuff, right? And there is contingency built into that 13 million. If you look back at the memo, they did a detailed breakdown.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So I know it's a lot. It's complicated too. So if we transfer this money, we're highly confident we will still be able to completely do everything we need to do in Polson that we promised the public. We won't be able to do geothermal. And so I also think that we talked about at the last meeting why geothermal was problematic, because it will require coordinating. It'll delay the project for at least a year, maybe 2 years, to coordinate it with the baseball fields. Because now you're digging up the baseball fields to put wells in them. So there was that concern that was going to be a problem. And then the payback on it was unclear, because we don't have solar in the building. In order to get the true payback at that building, they felt that the electrical costs were going to outweigh whatever you save on
The age of that building.
Yeah, we just don't know the useful life.
right, yeah,
Well,
so.
but hold on a second, because that's a variable that I think kills the whole conversation. In all of the Board of Ed's long-term planning for building, nowhere was there discussion about taking Polson offline. And I mean, anywhere in the horizon. And so we're talking about whether it's $21 million or $16 million. If there's some closure date in mind on that building, I think
No,
that has to be.
but I think the point is more, the payback period could be 20 years. So you're putting in a system, you're spending an extra amount of money, and your payback period is 20 years. And in 20 years, we'll be looking at that, we'll do a whole new facility plan, and we'll be looking at a lot of things, and that'll be just at the point where you're actually paying for an investment you made 20 years earlier. That was what the memo talked about. So we just don't know when we're gonna get the payback on doing, whereas building new construction, it's clear, right, from day one. But I think putting it into Polson, I don't think you can make a strong argument, that's all.
Because you're retrofitting it, is that why?
I'm not an expert in this area, but they feel part of it is because the electrical, the age of the building, whatever the envelope is for the building and everything else, they said that we would unlikely see, it could take 20 years to get a payback on the upfront investment that we would be making for geothermal. Geothermal is, we're doing it in this building, we're doing it in the new school, we have it in the library, so we're making a big investment in and we're doing it in Academy, we hope to, but we might find out from Academy that it's not gonna make any sense. Should we be putting in you know, this technology when we may never get any kind of reward from that, or, you know, benefit from that through our energy costs?
Well, so sort of going down that path of logic, then shouldn't we maybe reconsider the geothermal here because it's a retrofit? There certainly isn't going to be any additional electric capacity from solar panels. And if a traditional HVAC system,
We have solar panels here.
well, we have solar panels at Paulson too. So we're going to go geothermal here and we're not adding more solar panels.
Well, I know that the decision here had been made that we wanted to do geothermal. The other thing we can say with this project is the test run. And that's going to be installed this fall. So we'll know better once we get through that process. We'll also know about the rebates, right? We're going through because of the new incentives. I'm just saying that if we go geothermal, you're delaying, you're gonna, first of all, create an issue about funding, right? And then second of all, you're gonna delay the HVAC project at Polson by at least a year, possibly 2 years.
I just want to make sure we're not going down a rabbit hole. Are you advocating the geothermal? Is that what you're suggesting?
I am. I'm actually recalling the discussions we had, certainly Scott and Al will remember, how long we resisted the geothermal in this building and how many times Bill came before us and we said, yeah, sorry, no. And I think once we turned the corner, you know, I remember vividly Al invoking, you know, the mandates of prior boards saying this has to be a priority for us, which really did prep the conversation for the discussions around the library, right? And I think, you know, staged everything. And it was, I think, rightly so, discussed in terms of a mandate. Something that is, you know, very forward-looking, is going to benefit the taxpayers well out into the future. And I'm concerned, to be blunt, that we are jumping off of that mindset the first time we have a little crunch on money. And we say, well, we don't really need that, and let's give that money to another project.
I don't think
And
it's,
I'm
I don't think it's
uncomfortable
just
with
that though. It's multiple reasons that we're doing that. Like I said, the timing and delay. Only half of Polson has air conditioning. It's also going to hold up the generator project because the generator project, all the electrical work, this is all happening. We're managing the generator, we're managing the HVAC project at the same time, and now the ball fields, which is 2 years out in CIP. So, look, we have a lot going on in town. And so to try to stage this efficiently, to maximize it, I'm not saying we could talk about geothermal, you know, once we get closer on the Polson thing, but I feel like that's gonna be over the summer. They're gonna refine their analysis and come back with a final proposal that we're gonna go out to bid for. But if that's the case, we can appropriate,
Sure.
because that was never part of the
But
original.
I think to your point though, Bruce, I think we're under obligation too to consider it, which I think we've spent a fair amount of time considering it.
They've
I
done
don't
a
think
whole
we're under
study.
obligation to go
Yeah.
forward with it though either. I mean, I think it's dependent on the situation and variables of that particular project.
I think, I don't think.
It's
you
not
can
right
just-
for, I don't think it's right, I don't think we can arguably say it's right for every project.
Right. I think you always have to weigh cost versus benefit, timing, there's multiple factors.
Absolutely.
And is our ultimate goal is also to, you know, be carbon free, you know, reduce our carbon footprint. And I'm an advocate of doing as much as we can. But when I look at how many things we have in front of us and decisions, I think this one is going to be a struggle. And it's going to also delay the implementation of a project that has been needed for 20 years to replace that system. Every year, the more you delay, we're having to look at what we're going through here right now. Band-aids, because we've had the things failed, so now we had a part made in the town clerk's office. They had no air conditioning for the last 2 months. And a guy literally made a part to get it up and running to get us through the fall. My office has not had any air conditioning over the last 2 weeks, so.
Just so the public understands, it's actually quite warm in this room.
Yes.
It's a lot cooler here
I
because
know.
of my house.
So but you can't do that in a school, is the problem. You can't keep Band-Aiding, we've been Band-Aiding for 20 years, so I hate to push it out another 2 years.
So the other part with Bolson is that you have a 2-month window where you can do the work.
Right.
Where you have a new
Right.
school, you don't have a time constriction.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I think if we take a step back and just acknowledge what I think we all agree on, which is we want to see the new school built properly.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? We're not debating
No.
that. Where my concern comes in is taking money out of one project to do another project, and that was why I asked Graham about the contingency money. There's $5 million sitting there. At some level, it had to have contemplated cost inflation, which is why we're discussing this money. If the contingency isn't for cost inflation, then you have to ask, why didn't we have contingency for cost inflation?
No, the contingency, I think, and Graham can speak to this, is for a lot of different things. It's drilling and finding rock or unexpected,
In addition to cost inflation,
site
I think.
issues or,
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember.
Graham,
Billy-
you can
It
talk.
was
about it.
3% every year. I
Yeah.
remember Billy like hammering that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did factor in a lot of it, cost inflation in the original pre-referendum numbers, but the numbers we're getting are even higher than that due to supply chain and things like that. So we did factor that in.
Is it like 8%, Graham? It's significant.
Yeah, we had some numbers that were beyond what would be considered, anybody would have anticipated 2 or 3 years ago.
Especially like electrical, we saw that on the downtown utility project. We had to appropriate more because there was a spike, you couldn't get conduit
Right.
for a period of time, and when you could, it was really expensive. So the contingencies, I think, to cover those types of things, but also just things that happen when you build.
And this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm having a tough time reconciling out of control costs, not because the committee is doing a bad job, but just because the world is happening on the elementary school project, and Polson is 30% under. And I don't recall those numbers being put forward as being 3 or 4 years old. Those were fresh numbers as
No,
best
they
we
were
understood them.
They were escalations. They've never done a deep dive on that project. And
The
Bill
focus was on
has
the new
not,
school, I think.
pardon?
The focus was on the new school.
Yeah, it was on the new school. And so they had like a rough budget estimate. And now we had experts actually go in and build up what they think they toured the building. They came up, that's what the memos were for. And they said, this is what we can do. And we were never instructed or planning to do geothermal at Polson. It was a like to have, but not a must. It was never part of the referendum. It was never part of the original plan. So I'm just saying, this is where we are. We have experts that are providing this $13 million budget.
Let's play this out though. So
Yeah.
what happens, Peggy, if down the road, to just sort of Bruce's point here, if
Right.
what happens if, that 13 million is not 13 million, it's 14 million. We have the 1.5, so that's probably a bad
Right.
example. Let's say it's 15 million. We don't have enough to cover it. Do we have then the ability to transfer money back?
Yes, you
So
can
there you go.
transfer back from, depending on where the new school was. And that's where,
But what if the new school comes out at the top end of its budget? Then it's short, it's just short.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I'm looking for other places to take the money from
there's
that.
not.
There isn't though.
That's the whole thing. There's not. So there is, the positive of the new school is we will be getting rebates on the geothermal system, okay? That will be money coming back to, and this is where we're trying to, is that come back to the project to reduce the debt, right? I think that's where the funding will come down. So, we're always gonna be reducing what we're borrowing for all of this, which is the positive thing.
Which is great, right, which is great,
Yeah.
'cause
Which
like,
helps our
so
budgets.
for
Right.
all of this, ultimately,
Yeah.
regardless of how this goes out, we're gonna be borrowing less than we
Yes.
originally
A lot
expected.
less,
Yeah.
a lot
And it's
less.
significantly less, and that is truly glass half full,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Right.
Yep.
that is fabulous news. But yeah, the money we don't spend doesn't get, we can't then, like, I don't think we can take that unspent contingency money and push it back over into Polson. It just doesn't ever get spent. It doesn't ever get borrowed.
Well, let me just say this, if we don't transfer this to give them the budget based on the current design plan, we're gonna miss, and this is gonna delay the project a year. They're going to this, they need to get the approval to go out to bid. They're meeting with the state June
No
29th.
pressure.
So if we, I'm just saying, if we don't do that, and this has been a very tight timeline all along, if they can't do that, and then we can't go out to bid in that very aggressive timeline, school does not open in September 2025, it opens in September 2026. So now you've got two rickety buildings that you're continuing to limp along, Jeffrey, and very safe buildings, I'm not saying that, but you're gonna have things breaking down and all this other
Yeah,
stuff.
but there, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that I know Bill has been putting Band-Aids
Yeah.
on.
Oh, yeah.
For
Big
the
time.
past several years
Oh, yeah.
as we've been working through this. You know, and my big concern is I just want to make sure that all of the schools, all of the pieces of the project are getting what they've been promised, what we've promised the public, and that we're not cutting something out
It's a fair share,
entirely
right.
of one project in order to fund another.
So how about this?
Uh-oh. He's going creative.
This involves no groundwater at all. If we go down the path of the geothermal is not part of the scope of the referendum question, right? Then it is open for a special appropriation, absolute infusion of cash.
Yep.
And I think, you know, I would be comfortable taking an offsetting amount, so whatever we're talking about tonight here,
3.4.
and then having a companion recommendation for a, even if it's just an allocation that we set aside, that amount of money for a future geothermal at Polson, and that way we basically would get both projects. We're not asking for any new taxpayer dollars. This is money that we've already collected and is available to be deployed.
You're talking about in the undesignated fund balance?
From the undesignated fund balance. The money doesn't get spent at the new school. It comes back into Polson and it just offsets and returns back to the general fund. Now, it could be as simple as we commit this board and all future boards to not spending that amount on anything else, which I know we can't do. But we make some sort of public commitment to take that money and fund the Polson project the way I really believe it was intended. It's too coincidental that the 21.5 works with geothermal, and then you take geothermal out and, you know, we have this amount.
But I don't think 21.5 was inclusive of geothermal to start, right? It never
It
was in scope.
Yeah,
It never was part of the
No.
scope. So we're injecting,
never
I
put
think,
that, yeah.
geothermal into the conversation,
exactly,
which I don't think is a bad thing,
yeah.
but I don't think it was ever part of the scope in the first place. So the voters did not put forward a vote on geothermal. We're adding it now to the conversation.
It was never part of the project scope.
And I do have a question, would the selection of geothermal affect the type of generator that we have to purchase? Because I think with the home project, the type of generator you would use with geothermal differs from what you would use.
Let's ask
with-
the experts. Can we go to? Can we go?
Well, I don't
Well, if
think
it
we have.
increases the electrical load, then yes.
I wouldn't be prepared to answer that question. It will have an impact on the generator project because of the electrical. All this would have to be thought out. That's the problem. We have to have some variables removed, right? So they can complete the designs and move forward. And,
Well, it sounds like there's more information that we need in terms of Polson,
right.
but in terms of the new school project, Peg, you're urging us to act, or Graham's urging us to act
Right.
tonight.
With the.
And I think
yeah.
we're comfortable doing that in terms of keeping the school project moving.
Well, I have no interest in delaying the project. I just am uncomfortable with the way we're moving
Right.
money around. And I just want to ask the question again so Graham can answer it again. The gate that you're trying to get through, Graham, with the state is such that you can't allocate the contingency money to satisfy their requirement.
Close this so we can see.
Well, the whole package, we need, let's see. I mean, we need to show, a contingency, a reasonable contingency that we have a project that makes financial sense.
And I think that, we have to all be of a point and of a mindset that there's gonna be any opportunity to take funds back into Polson, but I don't think we're gonna need them unless we go geothermal. We'll know in the fall, right? Graham, we will know when the bids come back,
Right, exactly. So we'll have a much better handle on what,
where we are.
where we are.
And I think this board then this summer has to make a decision. Do we want to delay Polson, the decision on Polson, until we hear what's going on with the new school? Which will delay the project another year. And we can have that conversation in July, I think, and August. So if there's more information you need to understand, we can bring the consultant back to talk about geothermal and why it may not be the best path, for
I
the
think that's the
project.
information. we're looking
Yeah,
for.
so we can have that conversation in July and August.
Well, and also the contingencies to the other projects, like the
Right.
baseball field.
Right,
There
yeah.
are other projects that are dependent
Right.
on
And
decisions,
the generator project.
which I think are being taken into
Right.
consideration.
And I think what we haven't seen is how these all work together on a timeline. So we could do that for July and have that conversation. I do think, though, we have to make a decision, go or no go on geothermal, ideally this summer, or else we're gonna delay it a year. And then I think this new school, we need to do this transfer now, so they can go
So what is
and go
the,
get their bid approval to bid.
Yeah.
so the motion doesn't have the amount in here?
Pardon?
The motion doesn't have the amount. What is the
The
amount?
motion doesn't, but it's the resolution.
Oh,
So
oh,
so I didn't read this, but this is a motion to approve the resolution. I can read the resolution now.
it's 3.485 million.
Right,
So we're asking for a specific amount here. We know that's the right amount?
yes, that's based on
Yeah.
the memo that we came up with Graham of what they're needing. If they get the 2.5 appropriated, they need an additional, this is where I'm gonna, sorry, I'll go back and share this.
It's 3.485.
And the school project, right? And this is assuming no bid alternate. So we're just moving over what they need for the baseline design. The bid alternates is a decision process we deal with later. So they need $5.8 million. 2.4 is coming from the special appropriation, which we approved at our last meeting. And then I just rounded this, to be honest. I just thought that was such a precise number. I just did this in Excel, so I put in the 3,485 number into the actual motion.
Right.
Resolution. So that's where it comes
But
from.
there's a chance when we actually go out that number might be reduced.
Yeah, I mean, these are the best available information that our professional
Yes.
estimators
Yeah.
have at this point, but you're right, they're only estimates at this point.
Right, so this isn't money being applied to a firm quote. This is all in preparation of going out and getting
Yes.
firm quotes.
Yes, so that they have the
Yes.
secured funding to go out and bid. They need approval from the state to go out and bid for the project.
And this is based on 35% plans as they exist now. But we need to tell the architect what to design, to complete the design over the next 2 months.
Because if we don't move this money over, then the architect doesn't know, doesn't have a design that's funded, basically.
Yeah.
So,
So the motion is to approve this resolution.
right.
Right, and I'm trying to tag on. At least, not a motion so much as a consensus that,
I'm happy to discuss it further. I want to be conscious of the fact that it wasn't part of the scope. So I think we're mixing a little bit of apples and oranges here. To me, it's our want to be environmentally friendly, which I don't disagree with that conversation at all, but I think that's a different conversation than this scope and what has been approved by the voters.
And if you look at the timeline I presented at our last meeting, you'll see summer under Polson, determine final scope, determine future funding path if geothermal is pursued. So that's what we would talk about
We'd have
in
another
July
check,
and
right.
August.
Mhm.
And then we'd have to say, okay, we've moved that money over, how are we gonna pay for geothermal if we really wanna go forward? And then we have that conversation. We might then say, we really want geothermal, we're gonna delay everything a year and wait and see what happens with the new school. It just means everything's gonna have to wait a year, so.
Or we take we allocate the funds out of the excess fund balance.
Yes, that's certainly part of the
There's a ripple-
conversation.
There's a ripple effect with that decision. If we
So
do
every
that,
time we
then-
spend it, it's something we
gotta go
can't
to-
do on something
Right.
else.
or the baseball field puts off or whatever. There is a ripple effect with everything.
Yeah, there's gonna, and I think laying out that timeline of how this coordinates with the baseball project. It also, and when that means the air conditioning is gonna happen at Polson.
What
Yeah,
baseball,
so
I'm sorry,
these-
what
The
baseball
wells
project?
have to go under
Varsity.
Baseball
field.
field.
Oh, the
Yeah.
impact that it has on the
Yeah.
fields.
Because
that
you're
Right.
doing
wells,
the test wells and all that right there. So that
Yeah.
project's done for you.
I thought you were mentioning the building of the baseball. field.
No.
we
That
have-
field
yeah.
getting scheduled to be redone, that's part of their,
Correct.
It's in CIP, so
It's in
but I'm
CIP.
saying we have to then,
right,
Delay it.
we're gonna have to delay it to tie it all together with that project, because you're not gonna rip the fields up and then have them, no fields for 2 years, right? You're gonna rip them up and redo them as part of the CIP project, so.
So that timeline
Yeah.
will be part of our.
Right, and I think I'll have them lay it all out, and then I think having the experts to talk about geothermal versus conventional
Yeah,
is,
Mhm.
so, okay?
it's a healthy conversation. I'm glad
No,
we're talking
no,
about it. I have
no,
no issue
I-
talking
I
about it. I just want
don't.
to make sure we're talking what the voters voted on, that's all.
All right,
Well, that was
so there's-
deliciously vague.
so there is a motion on the table, for the approval of the resolution. Are we okay voting?
Yeah.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that was unanimous, thank you. Good conversation, I
Yeah,
think,
really
to
good.
be continued,
Yeah,
for
really
sure. Okay, so you got 3.5 million, you still gotta get your 2.4 million on Wednesday, Graham, so,
We
but
expect
thank
money
you.
back, Graham.
Yeah, because after it goes to the Board of Finance, so, all right, but yeah, we need to put, a timeline and all that together, so. All right, so next item on the agenda, discuss administrative policy regarding floodplain management ordinance, and this is really in conjunction with the overall draft floodplain management ordinance. So, we talked about last time, and I think our town council was actually, was gonna join us. So Jacqueline will include her. I had distributed to the board, a proposal, and there was kind of two options. We could either go with option one, which is some revisions to the, language that was in the draft at our June 12th meeting. So you should all have had a markup like this.
Yep.
And basically, this was something that the staff had put together. And this is a bright line. This basically says, okay, we're gonna accept appraisals, and these are the conditions of which, and it's gonna be in the ordinance. And then I came up with a second option that I felt from a administrative standpoint protects the town from those possible appraisals that I feel we might feel are just completely not in line with where the assessor's office is, and something doesn't seem right? That we're suspect of them, or we just don't understand why there's such a disconnect between what the assessor's office has versus what this appraisal came in. So I created this kind of administrative policy, so you just have the ordinance refer to the administrative policy about private appraisals. And then basically this laid out, what that policy would be. And this policy, then we can kind of live with it for a while and see how it's working. We could modify it at a Board of Selectmen meeting, so we don't have to go through the whole ordinance process. So I thought it actually gives us just some protection a little bit versus just a blanket acceptance. So that's where we proposed. I know that there were a few comments that staff had raised with Sam on option one. They kind of, I think John and Akko had put this language together And there were kind of two areas that, after this kind of got sent out, they said, we have two things. So I don't know if you want to talk about option one.
So one of them was with the criteria for the architect.
Because Carrie needs to hear you, so. Yeah, Carrie, there were some questions, I think, on the, because we actually put in the ordinance certain qualifications, and so, I think some of the staff members were just wondering what those certifications were, and is that something that should have been in the actual?
Yeah, if it's necessary, or if it's just Connecticut certified appraiser, it's sufficient. Because I think someone's in their memberships to something versus a certification.
So my understanding of our last can you hear me all? Can you all hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, good, sorry. So my understanding of our last call regarding this matter was the suggestion that I put into the floodplain ordinance specific criteria that would elevate and obviate the concern for the quality of the appraisals, excuse me, that might be submitted to your staff. And so that is what I endeavored to do. MAI is being a member of the Appraisal Institute, which means you have to go through a lot of training and you're held to certain ethical standards. And I felt elevates what's submitted to you. A senior real estate agent, sort of along the same lines. To get that qualification, you have to have a certain level of experience. And so, again, I'm open to whatever changes the council wishes or the board wishes to impose. But it was my understanding that that was my objective. And I'm just going to tell you that being an MAI or an SRA does elevate your standing as far as real estate appraisals.
Okay, no, I think they just were wondering why those were selected, so those were, right, one of the
So, yeah,
questions.
that sounds that.
Yeah, and then the other thing that the staff, I think that, our floodplain administrator had suggested 90 calendar days of the, date of valuation for the appraisal. Sam, I know some staff members that was kind of just a
Yeah,
time pick, which
so
was
that's-
reasonable,
Right, that was a starting point so that we know that we had some type of current appraisal,
right?
whether it's
I think
90 days or 80 days, I don't know if that makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, that seems reasonable.
But that's up,
Yeah.
that's up to,
So that means it has to be the valuation date, and we has to be within 90 days of submitting, I guess, their permit application, right? So they're gonna have to be prepared when they come in with that appraisal, and that hasn't been done in the last 90 days.
Right.
Okay, so I think that was just, I don't know, Carrie, if you have a different view of 90 days is too.
No,
It's good.
I think 90 days is very reasonable. Again, we have a dearth of appraisers now in Connecticut, so I hate to say it. And so I think 90 days is extremely reasonable considering.
Okay,
This is just sort of an administrative question. So the language here excludes other structures on the property. Is it the practice now that it's only the structure in question that is used for the substantial improvement calculation?
yes,
So this is just making it consistent with that. But fine,
it's not, there's no land value, there's any other outbuildings,
right.
it's, whatever building is being permitted, that's the value of that structure.
Right, so if you're redoing the kitchen, the pool doesn't count in the calculation.
Right, or the pool house, or if you have a
Right,
pool
shed
house,
or whatever, right, yeah.
right.
Okay, just clarifying.
I would also point out that you have only a 1 year look back. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would also point out that you only have a 1 year look back. So I think this is, a very generous view of things. As I said in our previous, right, okay.
So that would be kind of option one, put in an ordinance, we're done, bright line, right? Option two is not a bright line, but there is a bright line at a certain value above what the assessor has, and we talked about, 115. I use 100 because it basically is at 15% over what the assessor has, or 20% over, right? So that would be automatically accepted. But if you get an appraisal that comes in that is 40% over what the assessor has, so some alarm bells would go off. But if we go with the ordinance route, we can't do anything, we just have to accept it. So whereas this allows the floodplain administrator to talk to our building official who's an expert in valuing structures, and then our assessor really, just to make sure, what are we missing here? Why is there such a disconnect between what the town has versus what the appraisal has? And then he has the option to reject it. I know John didn't like this because it meant there's some discretion involved, but I was just trying to put an opportunity to catch a situation that might be a problem. Somebody coming in, putting an entire addition onto their house, and then to say, and it's, that's only gonna be 40% of the structure value or something. So, and this is through experience, because we've seen some problems at times. So it's my proposal. I will say the staff didn't want to use appraisal. They'd rather just go with assessor value, but they'd rather just keep it clean and easy. So I thought, let's just have one more conversation about
The
this.
staff likes option one and you're proposing option two.
Right.
The
Okay.
staff wants to keep it as black and white as possible. Take
Yeah.
discretion out of it, so everything's done the same way. And there's no issues of, well, you let this person do this, and this person did that, how come I can't do this? So that's what they're trying to avoid. They'd rather not have the policy, they'd rather have it in the ordinance.
Yeah.
But then again, to Peggy's point, the staff really would just like to stay with the market value of the assessors, and not have the appraisals, and then it takes all the question out of it.
Just sort of further data for you. I'm not gonna put words in the CRC, but they've reviewed it, and their consensus was more to just putting it into the ordinance. And then certainly the feedback that I've had from the public has been ordinance.
Of course.
overwhelming.
So,
Now, but let's talk a little bit about the difficulty of changing the ordinance. Because we can change an ordinance, we do that. And we do it infrequently because we don't find a need to do it. But should we find a need to change it, how onerous is that process?
So it basically requires a vote of 4 out of the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen and a public hearing. So.
So not hard, it sounds like.
Yeah, not hard.
So not, I mean, if we found we inadvertently created a runaway problem here, we could.
Pull it back.
We could rein it back in. Listen, the four vote is nice because that's very unlikely to be politically motivated, right?
Yeah.
So I think that isn't a knock against changing the ordinance, so.
I agree.
I had to make one last offer.
I know. I love creative thinking.
I'm just, because I'm the one that has to, I will hear the problems that will come in.
But the other concern is, what do you do with the one person that comes in and their value is 50% greater than what?
Yeah.
I think to Carrie's point, these are people that are carrying a weight of reputation. And it wouldn't be out of line for us as a town to go back to that organization and say, hey, you have a member that did this, that's way out of line. That is gratuitously serving the homeowner to get around this ordinance, this federal standard. That should count for something, for somebody who values their professional accreditation. And or go to the state with the same kind of complaint. I think, we've heard from Vin, and I'll let him fine tune the numbers, but this doesn't happen very often that people feel the need to go out. It happens infrequently, and then sometimes we get somebody who just really tries to push the limit, and that's a whole different problem, and we're never gonna, I don't think we're ever gonna come up with an ordinance.
No, but they will be able to push the limit, because we have no recourse. We just have to accept whatever is presented, as long as they meet those that qualification. That's all. So but knowing that.
And I think having the
we
expert
just have to see what
credentials
goes.
on
Yeah.
the appraiser is good. You
Yeah,
know,
I think
so that way
Carrie's
you know-
correct. I think that
Yeah.
means something. That
Yeah.
means something to the individual appraiser and it means something, that should mean something to us.
So may I address the board?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things. Obviously, it's still gonna be up to Vin and whoever to figure out if they have the correct credentials and experience, because as you know, the ordinance says you have to have experience with floodplain.
Oh, we actually took that out in the revised option 1.
Oh,
Um,
sorry, I don't think I saw that. Okay.
that
So I'll
was
put that
part of
aside,
the
I'll put that
staff's-
aside.
Yeah, that was part of the staff's recommended changes.
Oh, okay.
Because they felt that what does that mean and how do they evaluate that, assess that? So they just went with the certifications.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know if I saw that, but the other thing I just want to say to the Board of Selectmen is, we just went through a really tough challenge on somebody who was hell-bent on working the system, to get, the improvements they wanted without having to deal with, the
Clients,
normal-
yeah.
Okay, and it went all the way up to the state, boards and, standards committee. So I don't want anybody to think that this is just, unlikely to potentially be an issue in the future. And I am not advocating one way or the other, but I just didn't know if the Board of Selectmen is aware that we did just have a very lengthy litigation on this very issue.
Right, under the old ordinance, which had the town appraisal as the benchmark. So we have the problem either way. We have that person who is wealthy enough and determined enough to do that, is going to do that no matter what.
Yep.
My only point was that, this isn't a situation where, everybody should think, well, what's the likelihood we're ever gonna be, fighting about this? I just want to make sure that the board understood that we really have had a very recent issue with this, that obviously caused Vin a lot of aggravation and obviously cost legal fees to the town. So that doesn't mean I'm advocating for one position or the other, but I just want everybody to keep in perspective the fact that it could be an issue. And as climate change continues and affects all of us and the, deep issues, its new, mandates,
Well, then we might have to change it.
Right, but I think what we just learned is we have the opportunity to
Yeah.
road test this thing, and if
Yeah.
something doesn't feel right, we'll come back and revisit it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this is better than what we've had, I think is the point.
And I think we need to put our trust in our community members.
Yeah.
To handle this ordinance appropriately.
Responsibly.
And responsibly.
Yeah.
We need to put
Agreed.
our trust in the certification process for these appraisers, and if they prove us wrong,
There you go.
then we change it.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, and I have long since convinced myself that the appraisal for establishing a grand list is a lot different
Mhm.
than the cost to build or reconstruct or anything, a structure. I have no faith that if my house was torn down tomorrow and something, that I could build it for its appraised value on the field card.
Agreed.
So it is a mechanism to come to a completely different place. And that's why I'm so in favor of allowing the independent appraisal.
Mhm.
I'm hearing option 1.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think then we can,
Yeah, I hate to bust up a consensus here, if there is one.
If I may, I just want to say, I am not disagreeing with any of you. My bigger concern was that you understood that, it's, the issue is real. And,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that's all.
I'd like to speak let me tell you why I find option 2 attractive. I think under option 1, the town surrenders control of the process to an outside person, a fully qualified and credentialed appraiser. But ultimately, we are surrendering control. And I don't like that. I prefer option number 2 because I think it gives the town staff, I do think it gives them a red line. They can go up to 15% based on that outside appraisal. To me, that's pretty clear cut and doesn't leave them exposed to a lot of bickering from the public. I am just hesitant to turn over the keys of our kingdom to an outside appraiser under option 1.
Well, what about putting that stipulation in the ordinance?
Are you going for an option 3 now? Really?
There you go. Compromise.
I think that's the essence of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Peggy and I actually had a really good discussion about this offline.
I'm busting up a consensus here.
You know what I will say, let me say this one
We
thing.
thought the same thing.
The problem is that, you're now gonna have, well, you give your thoughts, I'm trying to.
So we talked
You go,
about
yeah.
the
Maybe-
utility of the
yeah,
policy.
yeah.
And then we also kind of flipped the mirror and said, okay,
Yeah.
well, what are some of the risks of doing it
For
for
the
the
town.
policy path? And the simplest that I can think of now is you get approved under the policy. And a month later, the policy changes and I go in and I don't get approved and the projects are similar. And I go, hang on, timeout, I'm crying foul. You guys you've changed the rules sort of behind the document. And he got treated one way and I got treated a different way, and that's not fair. And now talk about a guy who's got money to pursue things.
Okay, so
That's-
Bruce, you're arguing about whether it should be in ordinance or in a policy.
Yes.
I'm not debating that yet. I'm debating whether we fully accept the opinion of the outside appraiser as being 100% valid, or whether we put some kind of cap on it for those egregious situations where an outside appraisal comes in that's just ridiculous. And I like a 15% leeway given to staff that they can go up to 15% if the outside appraisal is, let's say, comes in at 40%.
And what happens after, who sees it after that cap?
Yeah,
Where does it
that's
go?
What if it's 16? What if it's?
Where does it go to? Does it go to,
It
does
stops at
it
15.
go to coastal resiliency? Does it go back to the board of selectmen? Where does it go?
Well, that's another step.
And that's the other thing that the
Where's the
staff
appeal
struggled with too.
process?
Right.
Well, and I left it as it's just, the floodplain administrator has the ability to reject it if it's over that threshold. The problem is that you're now creating a scenario like we had before. You're gonna get the lawsuit or the person that's not happy with that number. So they come into the 130, yeah, so I don't know,
So
it's not
so-
winning.
So like Scott says, if we give it a test ride, and if we see a lot of egregious appraisals coming in, and we go back and change it.
Yeah.
It's better than what we had.
Yeah, I'm okay with putting it in ordinance. It's a question now, what do we put in the ordinance? And I guess I'm reluctant to give the outside auditor complete control over that number.
So then just go back to the market value.
Well, what if we put 150%? At least it would
We'll put
capture
cap on
something
it.
absolutely
Whatever,
crazy.
whatever cap you
Yeah.
put, that's what the norm's gonna be.
Yeah,
That's
So
okay, at
it's
least
gonna
it's
come in at
capped.
that.
It's gonna come in at that. That's,
At least
if
it's
you put a cap,
yeah, but that's not,
That's-
we're saying on the one hand, we have professionals who are gonna do a proper evaluation.
I
So
know.
are they
It's like they're
crazy
setting the
to-
bar.
and
They're
that's
setting
okay.
the bar.
And I think those are the two,
Yeah.
those two thoughts don't reconcile.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If-
so, and that's what I'm struggling with. I'm like, but do you just put some way to at least, put a break in there so that something that's crazy Because then that's a problem. If they're coming back with something that's 150% more than what the assessor has.
So then let's tweak the process, let's tweak the
Yeah.
ordinance.
I think
You
we're
come back and you revisit it.
we see how often
Alright.
it happens,
What-
and then we we'll keep it super
Yeah.
simple for now and see
See
how
what
it
happens,
rolls.
yeah.
I can live with that if I'm the dissenter here.
I've given in at this point. I think though, that there is a commitment to
I hear it.
revisit this, and if I
Yeah.
do start seeing issues, then we will have to have the conversation.
Absolutely.
I think
I
Yes.
think, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, and that's, I mean, that's with
So,
any ordinance that we
And I think,
have.
yeah, we talk about it, and if we're kind of all of a sudden getting flooded with appraisals that seem to be 30% over, okay, let's revisit this.
Agreed.
I'm good.
Okay, so, all right.
You
So-
said it out loud, it's all.
So I guess then we can vote at the next meeting, including option one, it sounds like, on the whole ordinance, or we can actually just do it through a motion tonight, or we didn't have it as
Yes.
we have
discuss
some
and take
action?
We can open the agenda,
Number
a,
13.
no, it says possible action.
Possible action. Number 13.
So,
Oh, yeah,
I think we're okay.
Yeah,
13,
because
yeah.
nothing's changed since the June 12th, except the definition of market.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt as an ordinance option number 1 as presented by Ms. Lyon.
Can I amend your motion? I would say, can I do the motion?
You can do whatever you
Okay.
want.
Well, just to make
Gonna
it
us
clear,
move along here.
I would like to make a motion to approve the draft floodplain ordinance discussed at the June 12th Board of Selectmen meeting with the definition of market value amended to include option 1.
Second. I'll get this.
Does that sound better?
I moved it, so
Okay.
you can only talk to our public comment
When's public comment?
At the end.
Pardon me?
at the end of the meeting.
After you've already voted on changing the ordinance.
So we had public comment at the beginning of the meeting. I think you walked in a little bit
Yeah.
late. We'd already
Um,
started the meeting when you,
So Carrie, can we then do that by just amending the draft ordinance with the option 1 and then voting, that's the final ordinance?
Yes, so it was properly noticed on your agenda that you were going to be reviewing it as amended, I assume.
Yeah.
To me, based on what you're telling me, it's not a huge difference from what we discussed at the public hearing as far as my directives to put criteria in. So I think you're well within your rights to do it. You had the public hearing, you heard from the public, you responded to the public, and you should be fine.
All right, so we have a motion. Second, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can I make
All
a
right,
comment? What happened here is that you made a change that the public didn't see. I tried to get a copy of it. I can't get a copy. There's no on the website, a copy of what you guys just passed.
So,
You didn't take public comment.
no,
and
we
you're
had
moving
public
forward.
comment at the beginning of the meeting. All we've done is, we're basically making all the changes that the public has requested, okay? We're making wordsmithing changes to this to finalize it, because we've had this on probably 15 agendas over the last 12 months, okay? So we're just trying to finalize it. All we've done is made some minor changes from what she had recommended to the definition of market value. We've added in an appraisal to this, okay? So people are gonna be able to do an appraisal, they're gonna have to submit it within 90 days, and it has to be done by somebody who holds one of these certifications. That's all. We're refining it.
It's
But
not going
it-
against your tax.
Exactly, so, so we've had multiple public conversations, lots of feedback from the public. This has been going on for 2 years, so,
I'm fully aware of
yeah,
that.
so,
I've been
I
involved
think
in it
that
from the
we
beginning.
can post this, tomorrow, the clean version and the red line version from the one that was submitted at public hearing. And then it goes into effect in 15 days. And as you just heard here, there's an ability to change it very easily if we need to change it again. So I think we just have to get this finalized because the document's been just refined multiple times. We've done some ordinances in 2 meetings. This has gone on for 2 years. So I appreciate that you have comments.
But the reality is that what you just passed has not been seen by the public, and you're going to post it tomorrow
Right,
so the public can see
Right.
what you approved.
right, but we've had conversations, we are
Well,
allowed,
I
no, look,
understand that.
we've,
It seems to me that
if
the
people are
public should be
concerned, they can
entitled
attend the
to what you're
meetings.
voting.
So, anyway, with that,
I would just add, I'm sorry, I just want to add, there is Supreme Court precedent that once you've had a public hearing, if the changes that you make are in line with the public comments that have been made, that, you know, changes to what's being proposed is okay. So again,
we're not taking anything away, we've been adding a public comment and what the public wanted. So that's the difference here, okay? All the changes have been to accommodate public comment, all of it.
So on
So,
to number 14.
okay, with that, all right. So, item number 14, which I don't know if anybody said, this is on the proposed citation ordinance. And I think that Carrie had made some comments to the draft citation ordinance. This is just to put the conversation going forward now. So we moved on from floodplain. Now we'll talk about the citation ordinance. This is not something that is going to, we have not had a public hearing on, we're just in the
Discussing.
drafting process.
So can we just, this is the ordinance that provides the mechanism for citations?
correct, for issuing
So-
fines and citations under state law.
So this sits behind all the other ordinances and things that refer to it.
So you have a couple of ordinances that have procedures for issuing fines, et cetera, like zoning violations, that kind of thing. But as you are very well aware, we've been really hot to trot here on a lot of new ordinances with their own new violation penalties. And my advice to the town has been that you should adopt under section 7152C, the statutory procedure for issuing citations and fines. And so that it will be a global and consistent application. It's much easier to do that than to repeat the citation procedure in every ordinance that calls for fines or penalties. So that was the impetus for this, was again, you've got a lot of new ordinances coming online. You've got the cannabis ordinance, you know, obviously the floodplain ordinance. And I think we've made some modifications to your park ordinance. So to me, based on state law, the best thing to do is to adopt a citation ordinance pursuant to 7152C.
So if we do this though, because your comments were down on, and I apologize, I know the focus has been on all the other ordinances we've been kind of wrestling with the last 2 months with the floodplain and then obviously the cannabis. But on section 10, you talk about, you list all the ordinances that would be impacted by this. Would we have to go back and basically have a public hearing on all those ordinances to amend them to refer to the citation ordinance? Is that what we would do?
So what I had recommended, and frankly, that list, I believe either Jacqueline or somebody in your office put together.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what I had suggested was a preamble
Okay,
to the ordinance that would say that it applies whenever a citation or fine is ordered. But I felt that we needed to firm up the citation ordinance itself first and see if everybody was kind of on board with it. But I think a preamble would would take care of it.
This is more for our reference.
right, okay. So actually having to go back though and do, okay.
Yeah.
Right, and that was gonna be my first comment. It seems
Yeah.
like the preamble is missing from this and probably should be added, so.
we can certainly do that if you're in favor of even going forward with the citation ordinance. I was not clear on what your pulse was on this.
Well, it makes sense, I
Yeah.
think, at first blush, to manage the commonality rather than repeating it in every single ordinance. And then worrying about it, one of them, we forget one of them and it's now out of sync and.
Right.
They're all different too, you know, if you
Oh,
look
good.
at each of them, so. I think I know, it's, and I think the question I was thinking is who do you get to be that here, so you have the one hearing officer dealing with, or does each ordinance have its own hearing officer?
No,
Is it-
so I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Under 7152C, I'll just say, most of the towns that I deal with have a panel of, I don't know, around 3 hearing officers that are on like a call list. And if a citation comes in and somebody appeals it, you assign that appeal to one of your hearing officers. So you start out by, picking people that you think would be good for the job. And then if there's a conflict, you just move down the line. As you'll note, the hearing officers cannot be anyone who is charged with actually enforcing the ordinances. So it can't be your police officers or your zoning enforcement officer, or it's got to be somebody neutral. And obviously what I recommend is a panel. The beauty of this is that every time you adopt a new ordinance or amend an existing ordinance that calls for citations and fines, this ordinance will automatically kick in and set forth the process that is condoned by state law for municipalities to issue citations and fines.
Gary, in your comment, were you suggesting that we allow ourselves the flexibility to do a serving town official or town employee? Your margin comments, I didn't quite understand.
So the citation officer cannot be somebody who has enforcement authority.
Right,
They're
but could they
supposed to be
be,
a neutral.
could it be Al?
There's no elected officials.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no
elected-
So that's what it says in there, but then Carrie's comment seems to say, maybe you want to rethink that. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
No, I think it was
Oh.
on the,
No, because again, ultimately, the Board of Selectmen is the pivotal overseer of everything that happens in the town. You really want to have neutral members,
Politics to take.
community that you have faith in to be hearing officers. And what I recommend,
If he asked
All
me
right.
to do it.
So you, Sam.
I think this is largely a technical document that we should just ask Carrie to
Yeah.
populate
Yeah.
to as best she can and then let us look
and,
at
and,
it.
and this was drafted by a staff member who has a legal background, and I asked as a project to start this, I know, and then Carrie reviewed it once, but if you want to take a deep dive into this, Carrie, and come back with what you would recommend for us, I think that would probably be the best path.
Yeah.
well, I had provided my comments to what was presented to me.
Yeah,
Some of it, I think I'm gonna need some input, but I can work with you on that, Peggy, if you.
yeah, why don't we do that, and then we'll come back with like a
Just
real.
do that offline.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
That
so,
works.
and this would be good because we do have the or cannabis. It's the cannabis ordinance. So with that, the other thing that we move on to item number 15, discuss updating Board of Selectmen policies and procedures. This has been something we're way overdue on, and we also talked about it during the charter process. So I just was gonna highlight to you that I think the intention, I've been working with our HR department to come up with revised personnel policy recommended changes, so those will start coming to the board. I think we focus on personnel to start with and over the summer. So you can kind of review those. That'll talk about hiring practices, all the stuff that we kind of talked about a little bit during the charter review. And then the second policy that I think is important that we focus on is procurement. And I feel like our procurement policies are really confusing, even for staff that have been here a long time, and should be more clear cut. One of the things we did, like we talked about last time with Bill McMinn hiring an on-call construction person, getting all these kinds of things all cleaned up, thresholds, and making it clear to staff. So those are gonna be the priorities. And so we'll be coming back, and I just wanted to highlight that. And I don't know if we wanna do a workshop around this, or if you just rather me bring sections, to the board as
guess
part of
they're
a
ready,
meeting.
bring 'em.
Yeah,
I think you should do that. I do think that, we should be focused on the section with our own.
Our operating procedures.
Right.
Our operating procedures, and I think the two newest members of the Board of Selectmen, Jen and Scott, should be the ones to spearhead that.
The newest members.
Oh, that's nice.
8 years in.
That
That
was sneaky.
Come up with some sort of.
idea, Bruce.
Some sort of a working group that doesn't violate any freedom of information, spirit of that in any way, for us to work on that and move ideas forward, for the five of us to discuss. And maybe we do that as a workshop, the five of us. I think the other stuff is very administrative, very
Yeah.
much in your
Just-
core,
yeah.
and bring it to us, and that's great.
Okay, so we'll focus, we'll try to schedule something like that, as a workshop to go through some of the board select and stuff, okay?
Perfect. Sounds
All right, but I just want to put that on the radar and figure out a path forward.
For the record, I did not agree with what Bruce said.
We get,
Yeah, we did. All guys.
we get 2 votes for your every word. All right.
I guess with that then, citizens comments, so, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, they would.
Okay.
Name and address.
Yeah. name and address.
John Ford, 7 Middle Beach Road, Madison. I appreciate the changes that have made to the flood ordinance that have been made. I appreciate the changes that have been made to the definition of market value, even though I don't quite understand exactly what the language is that was discussed tonight. I don't think you should underestimate the unfairness or inaccuracy of many assessments of structures in Madison. Hopefully the assessor's not on the line tonight, but my garage, which is a 2-car garage with living space above it, has an assessment of $4,000. So if I get an appraisal to do some work on that structure and it comes in at 20 times that, it wouldn't be wrong or unfair. It's because the assessment is so off. So I just would hope that as you consider changes, which you may in the future, that just because the percentage is high, doesn't mean there's anything nefarious going on. What we're trying to do is to make improvements to our property near the waterfront without subjecting ourselves to this extreme cost of raising it up 9 or 10 feet or whatever it is. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, well, I guess that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.